She stood in her own doorway and didn't move. Elara Marlowe had meant to set down her suitcase, call for someone to turn on lights, let the city's hungry hum swallow the rest of the night. Instead, the quiet held. In the den, a single lamp burned a warm circle. On the sofa, her 5-year-old son slept with his cheek pressed against the chest of a man she did not expect to find there. Lily, another child, small and sure, was curled along the man's side like a comma. His arm made a simple shelter over both of them. He was humming, almost under his breath, the kind of sound that belongs to kitchens and long car rides, and the kind of love you never put on a calendar. Elara clutched the doorframe, breath snagged by a feeling that had no name. The night rewound. Her flight had landed an hour earlier than the itinerary promised. A deal had closed across a polished table in a city that had never learned to sleep. She had smiled the right smile, answered every question with steel and grace. The car from the airport sliced through rain, past glass towers that looked like ambitions sharpened into weapons. Her phone was heavy with unread messages. So much of her life lived there, alerts, approvals, appointments, a life impossible to hold. The driver let her out beneath the awning. The penthouse door accepted her code. The marble caught her footsteps and sent them forward, echo after echo. She expected emptiness. She expected the particular chill of rooms that cost too much and kept no memory. She did not expect a man's low voice, worn smooth by patience. She did not expect laughter, small and real, skipping out of it. Elara set down her suitcase and followed the sound. Caleb Rowan had learned not to hurry. The years had taught him that desperate hands break what gentle ones can save. He sat on the edge of the rug and held Ethan's little truck in his palm the way he used to hold screws at the workshop, a screwdriver balanced in the other hand. The truck's front wheel hung by a bent pin. He smoothed the metal straight with the slow insistence of someone who has been kinder to objects than they were to him. "Does it hurt?" Ethan asked, eyes wide, casted legs stretched across a pillow. "Only a little," Caleb said. "But little things matter." Lily drew on the floor beside them. Her crayons made a sky too big for the page and 3 figures under a bright, crude sun holding hands. She chose a yellow that squeaked on the paper, then softened the edges with her thumb. Every now and then, she reached out and touched the cast as if to remind Ethan that pain has borders. Elara stood just outside the lamplight and saw her son's face change. He watched the truck with a concentration that pulled his chin forward. He watched Caleb's hands and tried to match his breathing to the man's, slower in, slower out. It wasn't just a broken toy. It was how the room felt like it knew what to do with a broken thing. "Being strong doesn't mean you never fall," Caleb murmured, still working, not looking up. "It means letting someone help you stand again." The word struck Elara with an almost physical force. She had required strength of herself like a tax. She had required of Ethan, without meaning to, the best pediatric surgeon, the best physical therapist, the best schedule for recovery. She had charted everything except the fact that nightmares arrive in ordinary hours, and sometimes the most expensive thing in the room is useless to them. Caleb finished the truck and spun the wheels with his thumb for smooth circles. He handed it over, but his fingers rested a second longer on Ethan's small knuckles, a pause that said more than a thank you could hold. "Do the story," Lily said, without looking up, voice soft and sure. Caleb's hand went to his wallet. The leather had softened to the shape of a life. He slid out a letter folded so many times that the creased lines had become as much a part of it as any word. He glanced at the children, then at the ceiling like a man asking permission from something he still believed in. He read, almost in a whisper, "Show love in small ways, and you'll never run out of it." Lily breathed out as if those words had put her to bed 100 times. Ethan closed his eyes and opened them again, unwilling to miss anything. Caleb tucked the letter back with a care that made Elara's throat ache. In her world, paper was for signing away futures. In his, paper was for keeping them. "I wish my mom read to me," Ethan said, so quietly that Elara caught it only because she had leaned forward without realizing. The world in her chest pulled. She took one step, and then another. Lily looked up and smiled like she had expected Elara all along. Ethan's eyes jumped to his mother's face. Guilt flashed there, a child's mistake. Caught loving someone else. Elara went to her knees quickly so she could be level with him. "How do you feel?" she asked, and the question felt like learning a new language. "Safe," he said. It was one word. It held the weight of all her flights. Caleb rose halfway. "Ms. Marlowe," he said. He cried for the... "It's all right," she said, and surprised herself with the steadiness. She touched Ethan's hair, the soft place above his ear, and then did what the moment asked for. She sat on the rug. Lily slid her drawing closer. 3 figures under a sun. The lines wavered where crayons meet skin. The hands were very close. They moved to the kitchen because kitchens can carry confessions where living rooms cannot. Elara put water in a kettle. She had not used her own kettle in months. The click and hum of it starting sounded like an apology. Caleb stood with his hands at his sides, the posture of a man waiting for a verdict. Lily tugged his sleeve once and then rested her head against it. Ethan followed the steam with his eyes, as if it were a story rising. "I didn't know," Elara said. The words were bare as bone. Caleb softened his shoulders. "Sometimes life doesn't wait for us to be ready." She poured tea, the first cup for Lily, who held it with both hands like a ceremony, the second for Caleb, who paused as if accepting it meant accepting something else, the last for herself, unsteady in a way she didn't try to hide. They stood in the soft light that made the tile look warm. The rain at the windows turned the city to watercolor. Caleb told her how the nights had been, not to accuse, just the facts laid on the table between the cups. The way Ethan woke, and didn't want to talk about the dream. Only wanted to be held while the room turned back into the room. The way the cast itched. The way a hum can be a ladder out of fear if you don't have words. Elara nodded at each small detail, as if she were being shown the blueprints of a house someone had built for a child while she was away. "Why didn't you call me?" she asked. "And tell me it was more than I thought." Caleb looked at Ethan, who had fallen asleep on his elbow, breath hitching into the loose rhythm of children. "I figured you'd hear it best from him." Ethan made a sound then, a thin thread drawn from somewhere deep. "Don't go, Daddy," he murmured, without waking. Caleb froze. The word did not land where he expected. Elara's mouth opened and closed, not for correction, but to hold the notion of what the child had made of them. Lily's hand found Ethan's without her eyes opening. The whole room felt like a heart listening to itself. Elara carried Lily to the guest room and tucked her under a quilt that had arrived last winter in a box she hadn't opened until the first snow. She returned for Ethan and stopped. Caleb had already lifted him with the ease of practice. The child's head fit in the notch of his shoulder. Elara led them down the hall. The house, her house, made a sound she had never heard from it before. A softness, a willingness. In Ethan's room, she smoothed the sheet as if it mattered. Caleb set the boy down, hand lingering a fraction over his chest in the way of men who have learned to count breaths. Elara watched him. She understood suddenly that she had been building monuments when what was needed was a hand flat on a small sternum, steady and human. They returned to the den and sat with the lamp. The rain kept writing its small script against the glass. On the low table, Lily's drawing waited, corners already soft from being moved and moved again. Elara placed it upright against the book so they could see it from where they were. She traced the sun without touching it. "I forgot," she said. And this time the word was not an accusation against herself, but confession to the room. "I forgot what home sounds like." Caleb rubbed his thumb along the seam of his cup. "You remembered," he said. "You're here." She looked at him, not in the way a CEO evaluates a face, but in the way a woman might try to memorize the arrangement of a person who had held her child like something holy. The tired on his face was not the kind that asked for pity. It was an honest tired, the kind that comes from the right work. "Stay? Just for tonight," she said, and her voice made the question a bridge rather than a fence. He nodded, but he waited. She realized he was leaving room for her to change her mind. The kindest people are always doing that, leaving room where others crowd. They did not talk about the future, like a contract. They let silence do the delicate work. After a while, Elara reached across the small space between them and set her hand on the back of his. palm warm from the tea. It wasn't dramatic. It was a decision with a pulse. Later, when the house had settled and the rain had thinned to a finer thread, Elara stood again at the doorway to the den and saw the scene that had startled her into herself. Caleb on the sofa, head tipped back, asleep without defending it. Ethan's small weight rising and falling against him. Lily curled, one hand still on the edge of her drawing, as if keeping it from flying away. The lamp made a quiet halo. She crossed the rug and placed her hand on Caleb's shoulder. The fabric of his shirt was rough where work had made it so. "Stay," she whispered, and the word did not tremble this time. "Not just tonight." His eyes opened, slow and careful. He searched her face as if reading a letter. Whatever he found there allowed his mouth to soften. He covered her hand with his own. Lily's fingers slid over Ethan's in sleep. The three figures under the sun were no longer only wax and paper. The city kept its neon O's beyond the glass. Inside, the house learned a new sound, the breath of people who had almost lost each other and did not intend to again. In the morning, there would be breakfast burned and then redeemed, a cast to decorate with stars, a toolbox open for the sake of a door that squeaked. There would be a woman who would write a note for her own pocket, folded and refold until the creased lines married the words. Show love in small ways. There would be a man who would hum without apology, because some ladders require both rails. There would be two children who would hold hands under the same sun and call it ordinary, because children make miracles look that way. But for now, the lamp, the hum, the circle of a room that finally knew what to hold. And if you are still here with us, if the glow of this small lamp feels like it's warming a corner in you too, carry it on. Share this quiet thing with someone who's tired of loud promises and needs a softer truth. Subscribe and come back to the table where we set down our stories like steaming cups, where second chances are poured without measure, where found family is not a plot but a practice. We'll be waiting in the light.